is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback. Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's fired. He throws. It is.
Well, it's March 18th, 1974, and that can only mean one thing. It's the Past Our Prime podcast, where we look back at old issues of Sports Illustrated from 50 years ago. My name is Scott Johnston, joined as always with my compadres Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman.
Hello.
Hello, boys.
Hello.
Hi there. How goes things?
Excellent.
Good.
Excellent. Looking for another good show. Babe Ruth, boy. That's
I was thinking about the show and how, for me, it's become kind of a history lesson. You know, you go back and you read it, and so far, I'd say, I know most of the names. Gerald Willett, I didn't know.
Right.
I may have known Bob Thomas from his football card, but I didn't know anything about him. So in that regard, but then I was talking the other day to my brother Steve, and he's telling me that he and his wife, my sister-in-law Kim, listened to the Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier show that we did last month, and she had never heard of Joe Frazier, which, to a sports geek like me, seems impossible,
crazy,
right?
Yeah.
But you got to then take yourself out of that equation and go, Joe Frazier last fought in 1981 and, has been gone for a few years now. I mean, he's not, and so I was like, yeah, that's a history lesson. We're teaching people about these legends, and none other more today than Babe Ruth. But Mark, what were we going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, I remember as a little kid, I would get the encyclopedia out and they would list heavyweight champions. And there would be Cassius Clay, and I couldn't pronounce Cassius Clay, but
Still can't
be,
apparently.
I
evidently,
can't.
yeah.
But it would be Cassius Clay, and then it disappeared. And then it would be Muhammad Ali, and I'm going, what happened to Cassius Clay? So, I had no clue as a little kid and had to sort of educate myself and discover,
And that Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali. He changed his name, right?
Which brings up the one quick story. I think I've told it before, where some lady called up the talk show and said, "Man, that Lou Alcindor was so great when he started his career at the Bucks, but I don't see him anymore. What happened to him?"
I love the voice reenactment, though.
Yeah,
I do that.
That was
my normal speaking voice.
That was
Ethel
the caller
from Reseda.
Yes, that's right.
This is my radio voice. The other one's my real one.
But true. I mean, we've all watched, listened, studied sports our whole life. But every time I go home, and I probably can speak for you guys too, that we've learned something. When I go home, I go, I didn't know that.
Sure.
Even if I know that what I thought everything about somebody, you leave and you go, I'm driving home going, wow, who knew?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that leads me to what I was going to ask you guys, because I've had a few times now where I've had it, but I've had friends or family members say, I didn't know about this person, or have you guys had anyone come up to you since we started this back in January and say, I had no idea either who this person was, or it could even be a famous person, but they didn't know that they did X or Y?
I do. It was Lee Steinberg. I had someone tell me, I didn't know that Lee Steinberg went through all that. I didn't know he was that big.
Yeah, I had a friend too that did not know he had the issue with being. He's been sober now for 14 years.
And she had asked. She goes, was he really a big name? I said, oh yeah, when I was growing up, you knew who Lee Steinberg was, but yeah, so I've had someone do that.
My problem is I asked my 19-year-old daughter, who's, Gen whatever generation that is, and yeah, you know who John Wooden is? No, who's that? Muhammad Ali is? No, who's that? It's, I'm ready to hit my head against the wall. Well,
my daughter,
educate you.
My daughter's 5. I'll ask her. I'll say, what'd you think of Muhammad Ali? She'll say the same thing. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
We need more critics like her. Yes. Callie, bringing
Yes,
it.
exactly.
Yeah, I just find that to be the most interesting part is not only are we learning things, I can also see, we have a younger guy here, Jeremy, doing the record, and I can see his eyes pop up sometimes like going, I didn't know that, so, we're getting it a little bit firsthand as well. This issue's got Babe Ruth on the cover, taken from a book written by senior editor Robert Creamer. Babe Ruth was born in February of 1895. He died in August of 1948. And coming up later in the show, we will be talking to his granddaughter. That's right. He has a living granddaughter by blood, Linda Ruth Tosetti. She has got a lot of great stories about her grandfather, the man, the legend, not necessarily the ball player. So that's going to be one I'm really looking forward to. Let's get to the scorecard.
Oh, no, I got something right before the scorecard.
Oh, yeah, what? Breaking news.
Yes, the ad. Come on. Page 3, there's a TWA ad. And
What?
For any of, I know TWA was a very
You've
famous
been fired
airline
up about this,
for
buddy.
a longest time. I am fired up because if you look at these pictures, we all go on flights today, and you get on coach, and they'll give you a bag of peanuts if you're lucky. You get a drink. But, if you want to pay, whatever.
Right. Dressed like slobs.
Yeah, right. It's just awful. And in this image from 1974, everyone's dressed super nice, but the meals in coach, choice in coach on our ambassador service, you're looking at these beautiful plates and these 5-course meals. And then everyone's got leg room and they're comfortable. And a lot of them are reading these things called newspapers, which I don't know
What are they?
what they are. But it just makes the flying look really fun and comfortable.
Well, that's why TWA went out of business. you want to eat or move your legs? Get out of here! We'll have none of that.
Come out with
You get
$10,000.
Southwest. You barely. I love the airlines now. You'll pay. This is my new favorite thing the last year or so. You pay for a flight, and then when you go to or book the flight, then when you go to pay for it, they go, "Oh, would you like a seat?" I thought that was what I was reserving.
No,
it was not just space on the plane, but I got a seat on the plane.
It's like a PSL. You just have the right
Right.
to then buy.
That's right. I have a right to go to Boston in June, but I don't have a seat yet.
Just try to fly Spirit then, and you get less.
Spirit
You
is
can't even bring on
Spirit
a
is not
bag.
that much cheaper because it's like $90 to have a bag the size of your cell phone.
That's right.
Oh,
But these pictures, Mark, you're absolutely right. That looks like a steak or something there that they're eating.
it's
And-
not.
It's really good.
I mean, these two guys are one.
Look,
guy, they're all
I
in
remember
suits.
even as a 7-8-year-old, people saying, "Do not eat that." It's like eating hospital food. So it may have looked good. It's like going to a bakery in Eastern Europe. They look good. They do not taste
But those
good.
are the years you could smoke on.
I remember
too.
as a kid flying, and everyone, coach, no matter what, you got a full blown meal, and that was my favorite part. And it was prepared really nice. It wasn't just a sandwich and
bag.
a wrapper thrown at you.
Yeah.
It was a nicely prepared meal.
Yeah, I remember flying Lufthansa to go to the '92 Winter Olympics. So I'm flying direct from LA to I think it was Frankfurt. And like you mentioned, Bill, it was smoking. There was smoking, but you could only smoke in certain parts of. But used to be like it'd be like the first 15 rows were no smoking, and then the last 20 rows were smoking. No, Lufthansa did it instead of by rows. So like the left side of the plane could smoke, so that meant the guy literally right next to me, but maybe a foot of an aisle could smoke, and he smoked the entire trip.
But the thing is, no smoke was allowed on that side, so it never went over there. to
No,
get
it
you.
didn't.
It didn't. It stops right there and goes,
There's
I
an
can't go
invisible
there."
wall
Yes,
that just blocks
the
it.
smoke said, "I'll stay up here."
It's so gross.
It is.
Yeah, for people that fly today, you have no idea that it was actually enjoyable at one time.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. Or how about this? I used to drive my buddy Victor and his dad, and he, it'd be summertime, so he'd have the air conditioning on, but he smoked, and there was no rolling windows down, secondhand smoke, just grin and bear it. Kids back then, there was no car seats, none of that
No.
stuff.
And the thing is, at least in the planes those days, the sides didn't come off during a flight. So, we're going down.
Craftsmanship was more
well, maybe
important thing.
just the plane in general would go down back then. We're pretty good about that.
Okay.
Yeah. The scorecard section, and one right off the bat that I'm sure we all marked, which is that the NCAA instituted the use of aluminum bats in college baseball. Example number 4,553 of why the NCAA sucks. Texas Longhorns third baseman Keith Moreland, who had a nice major league career, was hitting .628. He had recently had a 21 for 27 streak. I think that comes out to like 777.
It is. Yeah.
He says the ball seems to, quote, jump off the aluminum bats better. you think? So
I hate the sound, the ping, bing.
Right.
It's just bugged
the thing that bugs me about it is, when will they get rid of aluminum bats? And I say this in all seriousness, when a pitcher is killed.
Yeah.
And they will be reactive to it rather than proactive, because that day is coming.
Yes.
Because balls aren't supposed to, they don't come off wooden bats.
No, like that.
I mean, it could happen with a wooden bat. We've seen it happen, pitchers, and it's horrible, but
there's no reaction time on aluminum.
None.
At least with a wooden, a guy might be able to get his
might be able
mitt
to
up,
get
but
it
you
up.
won't get it aluminum.
And these pitchers are now at age 18, 19 throwing so much harder.
Yes.
That it's just a tragedy waiting to happen.
I might be wrong, but I think like in Cape Cod leagues, they make them use wood bats.
Cape Cod leagues, the first time college players use wooden bats,
which is important because as you're a scout, you're going, how much is it the aluminum bat, and how much is it the plastic?
How does it
especially
transfer?
off-field power and that kind of stuff, right? You see a guy hit a pop-up, and you're like, oh my gosh, that just left the park.
Well, the way some bats are hollowed out these days, who knows, man?
Well, let me ask you. You guys played Little League. Did you use aluminum or wood?
Aluminum.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think you could use wood back then.
I think we had wood in our little Bronco League. I batted 000, so it didn't matter, but still,
You look good with it, though.
I did.
Yeah.
Sitting in the batting
You were
circle
ready.
going, here comes another strikeout. Yes.
Swing the bat!
I was waiting for my pitch.
Yes, you were very selective.
Yes.
Your war was great.
It was. I walked a lot, so there you go.
Mark?
I like the horse population part of the scorecard, where it's talking about that the horse population is actually outpacing humans, according to a report from Christian Science Monitor. So the book and subsequent movie Planet of the Apes got it all wrong. It was actually Planet of the Horses,
Right.
where the horses would take over, and
well, we talked, about both Secretariat and Riva Ridge a couple weeks ago. They were worried they wouldn't be able to have any sire any foals, and they combined to have almost 1,000 between the two of them. So it was kind of not necessary to be so concerned about that.
I think the sign of things to come was there was a television series in the early 60s called Mr. Ed about a talking horse. And the talking horse not only could talk, he could play baseball. There was an episode where he's playing baseball for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
He could playing football. He could do anything.
He could do it all.
Right. So you see, he was probably the prototype to this invasion of the horses where they take over the earth.
Mr. Ed was quite an athlete. He
wasn't
kick,
yeah.
right?
He wasn't horsing around.
No.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to rein you
I'm
in
here all night. Very good there, buddy.
Billy, you got one?
Yeah, Lily Ledbetter. I'm just going to say that she's 12 years old. She ran a marathon in 3 hours, 3 minutes. 3 hours, 3 minutes. Take that in. I've run a half marathon just over 2 hours. If she was running it, she would have been home, eaten, and probably gone to a movie, and I'd still be running. So that's absolutely amazing. But she did say, she goes, sometimes people ask why I run, and that bothers me. They don't ask football players why they play football. That's changed.
Yeah. Keep in mind that is 7-minute miles.
That's the best I've ever done is 6:52, and I couldn't do any more after that. So, and she did, what is it, is that 26 miles, 26.2?
26.2.
And she's doing that at 7 minutes.
Yeah.
You're smoking.
I covered the Boston Marathon many, many years in Boston, and of all the things that I have covered over the years, it is still the one that I'm just aghast at, because I will leave. I would be at the starting line. Gun goes off. Here they go. Then I get in a car, drive to the finish line, go through all the security and all this stuff. Takes about an hour. About 45 minutes later, these guys are running, they're in just over 2 hours. It's unbelievable.
Do they look
no,
tired?
They don't even look winded. I mean, then I'm there towards the end of the race.
Yeah.
Those people are looking winded, and even that is such an accomplishment. These people running it, and you go, oh, it took me 5 hours and 48 minutes. I'm like, you just ran 26.
Exactly.
I tell people this all the time: put your shoes on and go walk 26
6
miles.
miles, yeah.
First of all, you have no idea how far that is, 26 miles. I mean, you guys are coming from a decent amount away.
I live 32 miles from
I was
here.
just going to say.
32 miles.
And of all the people here, Bill, you probably could run that. But that's a long, long distance. Maine was having quite a winter. I thought this was interesting, not to get into climate change and all that stuff, but no snow 50 years ago in Maine. That is unheard of. The 50th International Snowshoe Congress was run on dirt instead of snow. The good news is, when asked when the golf course would be open, the proprietor of the course said, "Open? We never closed. We've been open since last March 15th. So good business if you own a golf course.
Maybe that global warming back in the 70s too. I mean, that's weird with the climate.
Right. Dave DeBusschere.
Yep.
What do you guys think of that?
Mark, you got to do this. This is your
first
team,
of all,
man.
I have a Chicago White Sox media guide from the early 60s when Dave DeBusschere was a pitcher on the White Sox before his basketball career with the Knicks, which I found was neat. It came down to the 63 season. They had to choose between two pitchers to keep the White Sox. They decided to keep DeBusschere and trade the other one. The other pitcher was a pitcher named Denny McLain, which may not ring bells to a lot of people listening, but he went to the Detroit Tigers. In 1968, he is the last pitcher in baseball history to win more than 30 games in a season. And he had issues. His career kind of fizzled out after that. He won the Cy Young that year, and he co-shared the Cy Young the following year. But in 1970, he got traded to the Senators. Then his career, he had off-field issues too.
Gambling stuff.
Right. Big time. But he was so popular, and he played the Oregon. He was on the Ed Sullivan Show, which was a popular variety show and stuff. But they kept him and not McLean, which was a mistake.
Well, it was and it wasn't, because
They didn't know.
Well, DeBusschere just decided to become an NBA player, and he made the right call. He becomes an NBA Hall of Famer. But he was a young guy, and in 151 innings over 2 years with the Chi Sox, he's 3-4 with a 2.90 ERA. In August of that year, he throws a shutout, beating the Indians. So it looked like the guy had a promising career as a pitcher. He just decided he was not going to be a two-way guy, gave it up to play basketball, becomes a Hall of Famer, but quite an athlete.
I'm just saying, we've spent many years spring trainings with the White Sox. Some of these stories I've never known. You know, I mean, we all know about the Black Sox, but there's so many things that seem to come up at the White Sox seem to be part of something. Yeah. So it's quite, it's. I love that history of that team, because when you go there, you go back this year, you get to think, wow, look at the amazing things they've done.
But I think a lot of teams you can go back and say, oh my God, they had that player and then traded him away.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And this is one of those guys that for me, it's a name, Dave DeBusschere. I don't really remember him all that well. He passed over 20 years ago. I would get him and Bill Bradley mixed up all the time. Yeah. But apparently quite an athlete.
The team with Willis Reed and Frazier and DeBusschere and Bradley and Dick Barnett.
You remember that, don't you? You remember, you've seen Dave DeBusschere.
I've seen him play. I remember the 1970 NBA Finals, Game 7, when Willis Reed came limping on the court when they beat the Lakers.
Quite a moment.
I watched that game live as a kid, 4:30 in the afternoon on ABC, because back then,
You sure it was 4:30?
It was 4:30 because it was 7:30 on the East Coast, and they basically, it wasn't like you moved the games till 9 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock. But they played them when they played them.
How did you get the rabbit ears perfect on your TV?
Thank God the rabbit ears were working fine. But
Wolfpack by a Fang, a story about college basketball as we are getting set for the NCAA tournament from March of 74. Tom Burleson had 38 points. The main reason that I'm bringing this up is because Monty Tao hit 2 free throws with 6 seconds left to give NC State thrilling win over Maryland. Monty will join us in 2 weeks as NC State won the championship that year. He was a 5'5", 5.5 point guard. And the thing about that NC State team is they only went like 6 or 7 deep. I mean, these guys were playing 40, 45. I think in one game they went double overtime and Monty and one other guy played all 50 minutes. I mean, they just did not come out of games. But that was a great team. Burleson, Tao, and of course the legendary David Thompson.
And this article talks about them beating Maryland, who was a really good team too. And it was 103-100 in overtime. Just a really good game. I mean, there were so many good teams in that ACC that year, you know.
But you talk about, Mark, that State only had to beat Virginia and Maryland to get the NCAA tournament. Maryland had to beat Duke, North Carolina, and NC State 3 straight days. To get to the tournament. They would have had to do that.
Right. So, and they take them to overtime. You had to think they were just gassed, at some point. But as for the defending champion Bruins, well, to be more correct, the defending champion Bruins, having won the last 7 tournaments, they had lost 3 times in the final month of the season, but they were back where they belonged. They destroyed USC to get into the NCAA tournament. There was a little bit of a question mark as to whether or not that would happen. Of course, their streak of 88 games in a row ends at Notre Dame. Digger Phelps said about his Fighting Irish team, "Get me to Greensboro, and I'll find a way to beat UCLA. I promise you."
But but UCLA, like I say, creamed USC by 30 in that game. We're watching it, but they hint
what
about
time you watched that game? Do you remember
I did
what time
watch that
it was?
game. No, but the next game they play against Dayton. Well, I guess we'll talk about it in the next show. But the next game they played against Dayton, people completely forget about. That game UCLA should have lost.
Right.
There never would have been this North Carolina State game in the semifinals. It was a great double overtime game. That Dayton game didn't go double overtime. It went triple overtime.
Right.
And it was an unbelievable game that UCLA was so lucky they won.
I just got one final thing to say. Monty Tao is 5'7". Let's get that right.
This article says 5'5.5".
They had Tom Burleson at 7'4", and he's not. So for someone that's 5'7",
why don't we
he's
ask
my guy.
Monty Tao?
We're going to.
They took a couple of inches from Tom and gave him to Monty.
It's not fair.
Nice. I'd give you a couple of mine if that
I
would
would.
happen.
Maybe one was with the shoes on and one was without.
I tell you what, I'll give you a couple inches and a few pounds. How's that?
That's right. Oh, boy. Poor Monty.
If it comes down to it, UCLA and NC State, they would be playing on the Wolfpack's home court in Greensboro, and
That might have made a difference.
Didn't work out well for the 7-time defending champion Bruins.
That's okay.
He'd rather be red than rich. Probably the greatest heavyweight fighter you have never heard of. Teofilo, is that how you pronounce it?
That's right.
Teofilo Stevenson, a 6'3", 214-pound block of a man from Cuba. Offered by an American boxing promoter $1 million to defect to the States and turn professional. In fact, he was offered it twice, turned it down both times. What is $1 million against 8 million Cubans who love me? He was quoted as saying.
I think he was offered $5 million to fight Ali.
Later on.
Later on. But he won the Olympic gold in 72, 76, and 80. He was so dominant a fighter. It was,
and they say would have been the favorite in '84.
Right.
Yeah.
But they boycotted the games.
And he grew up in Cuba, and he wouldn't leave Cuba, but he was actually born in Jamaica.
That's right.
Which is interesting. So if he had not gone to Cuba, if he had stayed in Jamaica, maybe he would have gone to the States and been one of the great heavyweight champions of all time.
And that's in this day and age, no one turns down any money, but just for him to do that is quite a story. And then he became quite an engineer out in Cuba as well. So he really had a great double career.
Could he beat the Allies and the Frasers? We'll never know, but his amateur record was 98-2. As Mark mentioned, 3-time gold medalist at the Olympic Games, one of 3 boxers ever to do that. So that's what I mean right there in terms of a history lesson. I don't. This guy's passed. He died in 2012. I don't remember him.
But he fought all the time. I think his final record was 302-22.
Is that
with
right?
8 draws.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he was fighting even in, teeny little rinks, gyms and stuff like that, and just fighting a couple guys. But I know they said he had lost one to Alexander Luxon in the 1983 Cordova card-in final because the guy had a plaster-like tape that they hand-wrapped under his glove.
That's right.
Yeah. So
that's right.
Yeah, if you're going to put it, basically brass knuckles.
Damn
in there,
Russians.
yes.
Yeah, they had to put cement in his glove
Yes.
To knock him out. And along came Ruth. Now, when you get to this, it's the cover story. It's going to be a long article. And this is part of a book, and it reads that way. I mean, it's just every little nugget in there I found interesting. First off was he was not an orphan. I thought he was an orphan this whole time, but he wasn't. His mom died when he was 16. His dad didn't die until he was in the major leagues. But he was put into an orphanage, St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys for Incorrigible Behavior at the age of 8. 2 months after the World War I ends, he's pitching for the Red Sox. He's an unbelievable pitcher. He wins 3 World Series with the Red Sox.
Yeah, people always imagine him with the Yankees. He won 4 with the Yankees. He won almost as many with the Red Sox, 3.
Right. It's crazy because that's considered like the beginning of the Yankee dynasty, which had ebbs and flows. But you're right. He wins 3 in Boston. Now, of course, after the last one in 1918 in Boston, they went 86 years before they won another one.
Well, it's the curse of the Bambino. They won 3 out of 4 years. They won the World Series 3 times in 4 years, and then they got to wait forever to win again because they sold Babe to the Yankees.
I just took the fact that when we see Babe Ruth, he comes, even the pictures, he comes off sullen and, serious. No, they said he was a very engaging, outspoken extrovert. He was a guy that was a life of the party, but you've never seen that image of him.
He holds out in 1919 trying to get a raise from $7,000 to $15,000. And the Sox owner, Harry Frazee, says, nope, I'm not paying you. So attendance was down. Frazee was a promoter of theater. Tickets for that were down. Negotiations, Ruth makes it clear he wanted to concentrate solely on hitting. Didn't want to pitch in this anymore, which is kind of crazy because at this point he's one of the best pitchers in the game. But he'd only hit 20 home runs in his career, but he must have known something, right? Because the team goes to spring training without Ruth, who goes to New York then to meet with the owner. Quickly, the holdout ends. He signs a 3-year deal for $10,000 a year, $30,000. And in his first at bat of spring training, he hits a ball somewhere between 500 and 600 feet. They got this is the reason why they call these things tape measures, because back then they would get a tape measure and they would go and see where the ball landed and where the ball stopped rolling as well as kind of, but they said it was, they estimated it as 579 feet.
And that year, 1919, actually the year before he went to the Yankees, changed the game because he hit 29 homers this year. He shattered the record, which he would then shatter the next year.
Right.
But it was a triples league. It was it wasn't a home run league.
No.
And Babe
A
made
lot
it
of
a home
places
run
didn't
league.
have fences.
Right.
You know?
And he hit 3 homers in 4 games, and people were like, what? 3 homers in 4 games? This is insanity.
So he hits 49 home runs after the 29. He's now got 49 for his career. And in 1920, he hits 54. And he was off. When he retired with 714 home runs, the next most was in the low 300s.
And he was sold for $100,000.
Yeah, plus a $300,000 loan that turned out that the owner of the Yankees had a mortgage on Fenway Park. That was part of the loan.
Part of the loan.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, who would ever think the Yankees would be owning anything of the Red Sox? Nowadays, they'd burn it down. I mean, they wouldn't.
Well, there were a lot of Yankee fans that said that they owned Fenway Park
Yeah.
for a long time.
But it's interesting is that the Red Sox owner was a Broadway producer. He produced Broadway plays and musicals, and he needed the money from the Ruth sale to produce his musical, which I
Right.
believe was
Nope.
No Nanette.
Yeah, he was
That's it.
he was
That
not
made him-
doing
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Losing money, and then he gets a hit, and it worked out well for him. But he says, the owner, Frazee, I think the Yankees are taking a gamble. While Ruth is undoubtedly the greatest hitter the game has ever seen, he is likewise one of the most selfish and inconsiderate men
Yeah.
ever to put on a baseball uniform. Ruth would join the Yankees, and a dynasty like no other was born, with Ruth being at the center of all of it. I really enjoyed this
Yes.
article. I'm looking forward to the next few in this series.
And I like how they focused just on his early days with the Red
Yes.
Sox in this article. You know.
I like that was one of the sports writers said, when Ruth misses a swipe on the ball, the stands quiver. And they said, end of a dull game, waiting for Ruth to come to bat was about all the interest the crowd worked up in the first 8 innings. I just got to go back. If you watch Shohei Ohtani the past few years in Anaheim, quiet, now batting, show, and the whole crowd would just come to life. So, it was even though they compare Shohei to Babe Ruth, in that sense, they were right. That's exactly what happened down in Anaheim when Shohei was there. He was the star of the show.
I have a good friend, a mutual friend of our next guest. His name is Eddie Frierson. And Eddie does a one-man show called Maddie, An Evening with Christy Matheson. I did a story on Eddie over 30 years ago when I was at KCAL. He's a great guy, extremely talented. Go to maddie.org. See where that show is playing. He told me recently that there's a good chance it might be going back to New York to play off Broadway, but it is wonderful. So I was talking to Eddie and saying, is there anyone that does what you do that is similar, but for Babe Ruth? And he said, no, I don't know anyone. He goes, but I do know Babe Ruth's granddaughter. And I went, light bulb. Wonderful. So he put me in touch with Linda Ruth Tosetti, the granddaughter of Babe Ruth, who joins us now. Linda, thank you for joining the Past Our Prime podcast.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I love talking about my grandfather.
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. If you could tell us how and when did you find out that you were Babe Ruth's granddaughter?
I think it was 5th grade. A priest came over for dinner to my grandmother, who was my mother's mother, and she had pictures, baseball pictures, and Babe. He found out that Babe Ruth was my grandfather. So he told one of the fathers of the boys in class, and the boy comes over to me and says, so you're Babe Ruth's granddaughter? I went, yeah. So he said, well, you know who he is? I said, he played ball for a living. That's what my mother told me. No fuss, no muss. All the pictures in my grandmother's house, he was just one of many Yankees. So I didn't think a big deal. And then he filled me in on how famous my grandfather was rather. So I skipped home. I said, oh boy. I said, Mom. She says, yeah. I said, you didn't tell me I was famous. And she said, because you're not. I said, yeah, your dad was, you were, I am. She goes, no, that's not how it works. You didn't hit the ball. And my job was to give back like he did. And that was my lesson. And then she started teaching me about my grandfather, firsthand. And I have 5 brothers and sisters, and they never talked about it because this wasn't a big deal. That's how my mother wanted it, because she was afraid we'd be kidnapped, like the aviators. Yeah.
Right, the
So,
Lindbergh baby, yeah.
Yeah. So she hit us. So she didn't make a fuss. I don't think anybody in the neighborhood knew.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So we know the home runs, and we know the Yankees dynasty. We know the baseball player that was Babe Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
What about him as a person do we not know, and then you have made your life endeavor to get that word out?
Well, that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know how he felt after he hit his home run. I know he hit the home runs, but what people, people talk about him, how giving he was, how he was with kids, but you've got to realize how put upon he was as soon as he left the house to go to the stadium. And then when he got to the stadium on the field, and it was constant, and he had the patience to do it. He never lost it. And when people would say, leave Babe alone, he'd go, oh no, let him come. So I'm in awe that he could handle all this, plus his marriage, plus his baseball prowess. And he was just like a amazing man, and he was humble. He was humble too. He never got heady. He knew what he was worth, but he never got heady.
Why is it so important to you to get this message out?
Because I think they know he was a good man, and that's a good thing. But I don't think they know the extent of what he did. I mean, you think Elvis gave away cars? Babe gave cars to orphanages, and he would fill the back, a station wagon, with toys, and he would have the kids get the toys, and he'd throw the keys to the nuns. And he did it all over, and I don't think people realize how generous he was. And if you talk to the Yankees that were on the team at the time, he paid for everything. I mean, they were making 5,000. He was making 80. They couldn't buy anything. He treated them all the time because he knew. And so he was generous with his teammates. I mean, this guy was incredible. I wish I was only as giving as he was. He's hard shoes to fill.
Sure.
What's interesting is so Sports Illustrated is doing a 7-parter on your grandfather, and the first issue comes on March 18th, 1974, and they start off by looking at his early career with the Red Sox. Mm-hmm. And people have this image of Babe Ruth with the Yankees where he's got a little bit of a gut, but he's got the big body, the big swing. And people don't realize these days with the Red Sox, what an athlete he was. He was chiseled. Can you talk about those early days where he was very muscular, skinny, a fit player?
Do you know what size bat he was swinging when he first went to the Boston? And he swung it till, let's see, he did it 1916 to 1923, ended? 21. How about a 54-ounce bat?
Wow.
That's what he swung. And it had to be long. 43 inches, they estimated that. And I found it in the paper many times, even though the Hall of Fame won't accept it. But I found the length, and I found the weight, and that's like a tree.
That's a piece of wood. I was going to say.
But I put that in hands of a lot of ball players, and they said it was like swinging a tree. How the heck did he get that through the strike zone? So I put in A-Rods and all the guys.
Where did the bat speed then come from?
I know, but he was strong. People don't realize he had upper body strength that was amazing. He was just built that way. Those big shoulders, and then it came down to a thin waist, But he was strong.
Growing up, loving baseball, Babe Ruth was just that icon you never saw and never knew. Mm-hmm. As his granddaughter, you obviously didn't get a chance to meet him. If you had that opportunity right now, what would you want to talk to him about?
Wow. I guess family stuff, you know. And I just want to meet the man that could do what he did. I mean, I'd probably sit there and stare up at him for the first 10 minutes, not believing it, you know?
He was the first rock star.
Yeah, he really was. Andy just said he's the first rock star. Oh, by the way, Yankees my husband. Yeah, he's the first rock star. He really was. He couldn't go anywhere without being, mobbed. Even when he ate, he could eat with one hand, sign with the other.
And he didn't. He did. How did he react to that? Did he mind that? Did it ever cross a line?
Nope. I talked to one of the guys that was with him when that happened. He knew Mama Leone when Mama Leone was alive. Okay, he used to eat there. And the guy said, leave the guy alone. Let him eat. And Babe said, don't do that. Let him come. Yeah. So he just keep eating, talking, signing. He talked to the fans. He loved the fans. He really did. When I call him the rock star, I think with fans, he loved his fans. Literally, wholly, the whole thing.
How do you think he would have handled social media today if he had that back when he
Wow.
played?
God, he would have exploded.
He would have had his own app.
And he would have had his own app. but you know what it is? What my question is, would they let him be Babe Ruth? Because of
Yeah.
what they do to ball players now.
Right,
Would
the
they leave
handlers.
him alone and let him be? I don't think so.
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
They'll analytics, please. My grandfather with analytics. Can you see that? No. They don't even bunt anymore. A-Rod thinks my grandfather had it a whole lot easier than now. And I said, yeah, he does. I'm going to tell a little naughty thing right now because there's a lot of naughty parts of my grandfather. He was kind of enigma. But A-Rod was a little standoffish when I met him at a thing we did. And so I started rocking on my feet, back and forth, back and forth. So with my hands behind so I said, hey, Alex, you've been a bad boy. It was doing Madonna. And they made it up, honest. I said, yeah. He said, well, it had to be easier for your grandfather. So with that, I told him a story of my grandfather on the train. Now, when they used to travel, they had a card that's for the press. Okay, there were 20 papers just for my grandfather. Okay, so all of a sudden the door opens up. Here comes Babe, stock naked, Claire right behind him with a knife. And they went out the other door. And one reporter said to the other, it's a good thing we didn't say what we just saw. And with that, A-Rod's whole body language changed.
That's hysterical. Let me ask you this, because he comes off as this fun-loving, affable guy. But in this SI article, it talks about how his opponents used to call him some of the most vile, horrible words. The N-word, ape.
Ty Cobb. That was Ty Cobb. But that's what they called him.
And I just wanted to say that's kind of ironic because, his relationship with the black ball players, the Negro Leagues, was very good.
They challenged him. He loved the Negro Leagues. All the good pitches were coming out of the Negro Leagues. He loved them. And he would break bread with them. And, the dancer there, oh, God, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going a little blank. Bojangles.
Bill Robinson.
Yep. And he used to travel with my grandfather. They were great friends. In fact, Bojangles ended up owning the Black Yankees.
Right, that's right.
And my grandfather would take him with him wherever he went. And if Bojangles couldn't stay, Babe said, then I'm not staying. So Bojangles stayed in some nice places. But yeah, because there was still segregation when they got to the South.
Sure.
So yeah, so no, but he loved the guys, and they challenged him because they'd throw a pitch once, they get him once, maybe twice, but by the third time he got the pitch down, and so when it came to the major leagues, he was no dummy. He was all set, you know, and he picked the Cubans, the New Haven Cubans, I think they were called, was his first barnstorming pick during the winter because everybody did something. They went back to the farm, and Babe didn't have anything to go back to. So he did, that's when he started barnstorming different places. And he was good with the guy. The guys loved him because when he played with them, they would make maybe a buck, by the time everybody paid everybody, they get a buck. When Babe played with them, they get $1,500 apiece. And if they didn't make the gate, Babe made it up, and they got their pay. And who told me that was Monty Irvin, my husband, Monty Irvin.
You've got your own fact checker right there.
I know. Yeah. Well, if you ask statistics, that's it.
Good.
But
Good.
well, I had an operation. I think I'm a little deficit. I used to be, but I'm just getting OCD.
You're doing just fine.
Yeah.
But he would say, if they were lucky on an average day, they could have a martini, 2 martinis, a steak, and if there was something left over, they go to movies. And that's when Babe came, all bets were off. They got
There's $1,500 a month.
$1,500 a month, I'm sorry. And so to them, that was gold. And they loved him back. He had a great time.
Yeah, so Babe was ahead of his time.
Well,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And women. Do you know he had women's seminars?
No.
Yes. I have pictures of him teaching women how to play ball. See, baseball saved my grandfather's life. He said if he didn't have baseball, you must have heard this, he'd be in a penitentiary or a graveyard.
wow.
And so he truly believed that. So if he could have everybody, woman, man, child, play baseball, it would help them like it helped him. So that's why he did what he did.
While he was playing the game, did he ever run across another player and go, this kid is going in the wrong direction? I see a lot of my early youth in him, and tried to straighten that kid out?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. In fact, my grandfather never slept. He was ADHD. And he would watch the trains come in the early morning, So he'd get to the ballpark, whether it be Boston or New York, very early. And he would help the boys that were filling the bags, popcorn and stuff like that. And he'd often tell them, hey, guys, don't mess around. Go to school. Stay in school. He used to all the time. And I'm sure he probably ran into a troubled child, especially there. And he tried to talk to him. Yeah. He told him what he went through. And so he tried. He did.
These stories are just amazing because this is what you never heard about Babe Ruth. Why has it taken so long for these stories to come out? These are fantastic. Learning about him as a person, not just a home run hitter.
Well, I know there's a lot of Negro Leaguers, including Monty Irvin, that spoke up about my grandfather, but they still don't want to admit it. I wanted to get Babe retired from baseball. Leave 3 on the field. I think it's thrilling, but have that circle hanging in every stadium. And Mrs. Robinson doesn't want it.
Rachel.
Rachel Robinson says it's not going to happen. So I go on because I don't think if Babe doesn't need it, you know, everybody loves him. They do try and knock Babe down. Maybe he's got too many accolades and they don't like it. I'm talking about Landis. I'm gonna tell you Landis's problem with my grandfather was he wanted to be the commissioner that saved baseball. And my grandfather ended up saving baseball.
That's correct.
Right.
And that tweaked his nose out of joint. And then my grandfather knew what he could do. So when he'd come up and with these silly things, Babe says, I'm not doing that. I'm barnstorming. So he says, well, I'll throw your friends out. Babe said, you can't throw me out. You can't throw my friends out. Well, he did when Babe sat out, 15 games. And Bob Musial sat it out with him. So when Babe did that, he just didn't take his friends anymore because he used to like to have them earn money, you know?
Sure.
But then he couldn't take them anymore. And Landis was upset because Babe was so popular, Landis couldn't do anything.
Yeah, Babe was bigger than the game at that point.
Oh, yeah. But Babe's not the one that treated that
Right.
way.
No, it's just a fact, and so he used it to the good. He could get he could get his buddies paid for, protected. If he could use it for good, then why not?
That's what he did. But Landis was so, I don't know what to say.
Not a good guy.
So, another important thing about Landis, he thought maybe my grandfather had black in him.
So is that where that came from?
Yep, that was Landis. And what it is my grandfather, I've met a lot like my grandfather. They're called mountain Germans. You know how you have Garrick, who was Aryan looking,
right?
You know, very thin, clean. My grandfather was mountain. He had an umbrella nose, they called it. You know, seriously, I met a German woman, and she says he had something Onaza. I can't pronounce it, but it means that rain doesn't get on his lip.
Ah.
So Landis wasn't sure because when he was out, he got dark. You know, I could see how they would easily say maybe. You know, but
and you think of that, you know, now we don't think of that as a insult, but back then it would have meant his livelihood was gone. You know,
he got the moniker when he was in school of the lips, and I don't want to say it. And they thought he was black because he got so dark. Him and the boxer used to get so dark, Jack Dempsey.
Right.
But he wasn't.
So Babe passed away in 48, but he was able to still be alive when Jackie did break the color barrier. What did that mean to him when that happened in 47?
Well, he was really sick, and then I don't even think he had anything to say. He died August.
But he would have been for that.
Oh yeah, because he loved the guys. He would have said, breaking the barrier, are you kidding me? He would have been ecstatic because that's what he was working towards.
Are they talking about the Negro Leagues?
Yeah.
In the barrier?
Yep.
Can I add a thing?
Can he add one thing?
Please,
Yes.
Come on in.
Fleetwood Moses Walker was the first Afro-American to play professional baseball, not Jackie Robinson. If it was Cap Anson, who was a race in 1904, they came across that gentleman's agreement where after this game,
Nobody.
no Negro Leaguers were playing in baseball.
It wasn't written. It was understood.
So,
Gentleman's agreement.
right. Cap Anson said, "Look, I will play this game. This will be the last game we play against those."
Right.
Wow.
Okay. So
that was in 1904.
that was in 1904, and Cap Anson refused to take the field, but because they already sold all the tickets, they made him promise him after this game. That's the end of it. So that's what happened.
And it lasted all those years.
Yeah.
Was Babe ever frustrated? Because I imagine he says, I want to play against the best players in the game.
Oh, yeah.
And was he frustrated that he couldn't play with them because so many of them were forced to having to play in the Negro Leagues?
Right.
Exactly. In fact, who's the guy
Satchel Paige.
Satchel Paige. He got a hit off Satchel Paige. But yeah, no, these were great guys he was playing against. And he kept telling Landis, what's the matter with you? This game would be so much better and so much more exciting. You guys want to know why he didn't become manager?
Why?
Because he was going to be a player of color on the team, and Landis knew it.
Really?
Yep. You could guarantee that there would have been a black player on the Yankees or whatever team he was going to be on.
So
Sure.
do you think Landis
We're
was
talking
really
about-
upset when, after the Black Sox scandal in 1919, and baseball needed a hero, and Babe became that hero? Do you think he was upset because he couldn't control that?
Landis actually double crossed him. Guy who the team, what's the team? The one that cheated.
Black
White
Sox.
White Sox, Chicago White Sox.
Well, he told if the manager, if he came clean, he would excuse the guys and let them play. So they admitted what they did, and then he double crossed the owner and threw him out of the game. So there's Landis for you.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, I don't know if he knew he was doing it because he loved baseball so much. We're talking franchise by franchise. He bought all the fans back because they were more moral then. And they were so insulted that this game they loved was scarred. Don't forget, it was an event. They used to dress up to go to a ball game.
Right.
And so Babe, with his home runs, he was the first to do it. He brought all the people back. And Landis couldn't control it. Babe got the moniker. He saved baseball.
You know, there have been plenty of movies made about Babe. Do you like any of them? And do you have a particular favorite?
Well, there was one that was a made-for-TV movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't bad. The Babe Ruth story, I know people love it, but please, it's a Claire Ruth story. It wasn't Babe Ruth. He was dying by the time. In fact, my mother was so upset because they dragged him into the showing of it, and he couldn't even stand. That's how sick he was. And my mother was just beside herself. And so I'm trying to think which one.
What about
Sandlot? I love
yeah.
Sandlot.
Yeah.
Sandlot. I'll claim that as a Babe Ruth story. The ball, all the kids working together. I like to claim that as Babe Ruth. Which, by the way, his first bat was given to him by Shoeless Joe Jackson. It was hand whittled.
Wow.
It was hand whittled. Shoeless Joe's, if you
He
look
cut
at
down
him,
an oak tree and then he whittled it.
and who put the knob at the end of the bat?
You tell me.
Yeah.
Well, long story short, there was a Sabre guy. And my mother told me this. One of the first things she told me was that my grandfather put the knob on the bat. He used to swing so hard and it would fly out of his hand because they were all just flared. They were just little flare. So Babe said, I want a knob on my bat so I could put my pinky underneath it and it wouldn't fly out of his hand. So the Sabre guy goes, that's not true. I said, okay. My mother told me, and why would she tell me that? So we were looking at the ball, what was it? Who did the ball thing?
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns. If you do number 4, you see Babe coming out of a dugout. Every single bat is just flared. And there's Babe picking up his bat with the knob. So the guy goes, okay. I said, Moms don't lie. Why would she tell me that if it wasn't true?
Yeah, Linda, I've got to ask. A number of years ago, you had an auction of Babe Ruth memorabilia. Why did you do that, and how tough was it to let certain stuff go? Because that's your grandfather.
All of it. All of it was tough. Claire took most everything. Her son took the rest. And there were a few pieces my mother managed to get, including tables and stuff. But what happened was more and more people would say I had stuff. Even papers would talk about the room I had. And with the way things are going, people breaking into houses, I said, Andy, we got to do something. So let's divvy it up with the great-grandchildren. And everybody wanted the same pieces. So that wasn't going to work. So what I did was I said, okay, I hate auctions. Oh, I hate them. But I did it because that's the only way we could do it. And went to Yankee Stadium, and this guy had an auction. And I took the money and I put it in a bank. The kids need it. It's sitting there.
Nice.
I haven't taken any of it. It's all the stuff. And I'm sleeping better at night. They're breaking in. They were breaking in, taking things, even in rural Durham. So I was scared. And Andy and I, we're getting older. I'm 69, he's 70. So we said we gotta do something. We gotta find a home. Now, the second one was I could have given it to a museum, but the Hall of Fame is the only one that's not allowed to sell it. If I had given it to the Babe Ruth Baseball Museum in Baltimore, they're allowed to sell.
So you lose control, basically.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I said, no, that's not going to happen. I'd rather put it in the hands of fans, and then the money's there for the kids, whether it be college, whether it be,
We do a little segment here called 50-50, which is you have a 50% chance of getting a trivia question right from 50 years ago, but I'm going to take a little liberty with that, okay?
Oh,
So
sure.
they have the article on Babe Ruth 50 years ago in the Sports Illustrated. So here's the question, and I'm not even going to give you an A or B because I got to imagine you know the answer. Who played your grandfather? Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure here. Who played your grandfather? Who played Babe Ruth in Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper?
Oh, Babe.
Yep.
Babe played himself. In fact, you know that thing about the hats?
Mm-hmm.
Where they did, well.
No, I don't.
If you got the straw hats they wore?
Oh, okay.
Well, they were taking bites out of it. That's not quite true. If one player saw another one, they'd put the fist through it. That was a real thing. And but there they had them bite it because I don't think they were strong enough to knock the top out.
Right. I remember the scene. He's on the train. He says, I just bought this new straw hat. No one touch it. No one mess with it.
Yeah.
And then they get the Gary Cooper's Lou Gehrig character to bite it. He gets in trouble. Basically.
Yeah, because he bites the brim. But actually, they used to put their fist through it.
I want to tell everybody that we are talking to Linda Ruth Tosetti and her husband, the fact checker, right next to her there. Go to truebaberuth.com. You're not going to find out there, how many home runs he hit in 1925, or you're going to find out more about Babe Ruth because she is the granddaughter of the legendary Babe Ruth. There's a quote here that I just want to say goodbye to, Linda, that you have that says, "For above everything else, I want to be part of and help the development of the greatest game God ever saw fit to let man invent, baseball." That was Babe Ruth 75 years ago, right before he passed. And here we are, 75 years later, his granddaughter doing everything in her power to make that happen. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. It's been so eye-opening. I like to think of this podcast almost as like a history lesson, and that's exactly what it was today. So thank you both very much for coming on our show.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
hey, guys,
you.
can I leave you with one thing?
Please, please.
Hey, somebody asked Linda the other couple of months ago about her grandfather, Mickey Mantle, Jody, and everything. So kind of thought about it, and we're going to leave it with this, okay? Today's ball players, the game has changed, obviously. Money has changed, obviously, okay? But think of this. Joe D, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, Stan Musial, Harmon Killebrew, okay? They were all generational. Once their fans are gone, who's even gonna know they exist? Here's a granddaughter whose grandfather is iconic. She gets 50 to 200 pieces of mail a month, flats, bats, balls, just letters for what she does. Because she's well known out there that she'll pretty much sign anything like her grandfather did, because she doesn't want to disappoint anybody.
Are we done? Because I got one more thing. If you
Please do it.
Please say it.
I was in Florida. Well, I met this man, Michael Gibbons, and he came. Now he was, how old is he?
In his 90s.
He was in his 90s, and this is like
In a wheelchair.
15 years ago, and or even more now, 20 years ago. And he wanted to talk to me. See, a lot of people want to talk to me because we are the direct descendants, and I look like him. I don't know how I was gifted with this face. It's on a girl, which is even more weird. But anyway, he came to me and he said, I got to tell you a story about your grandfather. When he used to play at Candlewood Park, this kid, now I had to tell you, the balls were really filthy then. He would retrieve the balls, bring them to Babe, for Babe to sign them. And he said, your grandfather would be in the outhouse and I'd be knocking on the door saying, Babe, I need. So I said, wow, isn't that nice? He said, yeah, but I never told him, but he seemed to know that I needed these balls. His father, it was during the Depression, his father lost his job. And guess what put food on the table? Those baseballs.
Yeah. Wow.
So the first set, now Babe didn't know this. I think he knew, but he was never told. And he said, look, save some money from these, buy new ones, and I'll sign them for you. So he'll make more money. So I think he knew. And so he said, and the one thing that I'm sorry, I never thanked him. I never said thank you. So there you go. That's my grandfather. I think he knew people very well. He knew people that were down and out.
Yeah.
And he had a sixth sense.
Legendary stories about a legendary man.
Yes.
Thank you both once
Yes.
again for sharing
Boy.
your insight. It's been a great few minutes with you guys. Thank you both.
Oh, it was
Thank
fun.
you, Andy.
Anytime
Andy.
you guys need me, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you both. Enjoy your day.
Bye.
So there you have it. The granddaughter of Babe Ruth. I mean, think of that. If we're talking Mount Rushmores of all-time greatest athletes, we're going to have an argument as to who the four are. You're not going to have much argument that Babe Ruth isn't one of them.
No.
Yeah,
And even like you say today, you mentioned Babe Ruth's name.
Exactly.
And people know who he is.
But what she did, she humanized the man.
Right.
Come on, what did we see as a kid? Sort of a curmudgeon-y guy. He hits home runs, never looked happy.
Right, was out all hours of the
Yes,
night,
yeah.
Up to no good type
Yeah.
of stuff. And yet here he was who basically, lived his life to do good, to give back.
It's amazing MLB wouldn't want to play up on that and give more of a platform to show that he wasn't just what we see in
This
clips.
caricature.
Yes, yeah.
From baseball long ago, let's bring it up to date. 1974, of course, up to date. But an article in there called Familiar Faces in New Places bunch of off-season trades took place.
Yep.
Have to remember, I think we're still before free agency. So, guys stayed with teams for forever back then. The team had all the control. First and foremost, this trade involved the guys for both teams that you'd heard of. Claude Osteen goes from the Dodgers to the Astros for Jimmy Toy Cannon Wynn. Osteen, a solid, good pitcher for the Dodgers for years. Didn't do much after leaving, though. But then Jimmy Wynn comes over and has a couple good years with the Dodgers.
Yeah,
Toy Cannon.
Yeah. And Osteen made it midseason before he was traded to St. Louis. You
Yeah.
know? And so he wasn't there long, and Jim Wynn played well.
It's weird looking at this article. I mean, like you see Ron Santos in
In
a
a
White
White
Sox
Sox.
uniform.
Right.
Right. This was Mr. Cub, you know.
Right, Mr. Cub,
It was
really.
like
I
Willie
mean,
McCovey in a Padres
right?
uniform.
Both those guys. You
And-
just think of, like I said, because players played so long
Yes.
with one team, that
Yes.
doesn't happen that much anymore,
And
But
Willie Davis with the Dodgers,
Yeah.
also in Montreal.
And who did Ron Santo get traded for? Still with the White Sox now.
he's still with the White Sox. Tell me.
Steve Stone.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
Steve
Yeah,
Stone.
that's right. Funny.
And Ferguson Jenkins, I mean, you look at that he whatever was 14 and 16 one year. He gets traded to Texas.
He had won 20 games the prior
Yes,
6 years
yes.
in a row.
He had one sort of bad year. They traded him, and then he won 25 in Texas.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Along with
And-
Catfish Hunter.
And
Yeah.
what I remember about Ferguson Jenkins, because, I was born in Chicago and I
Yeah.
remember seeing him pitch with the Cubs, is so Juan Marshall was known for this really high leg kick, Everyone knew the Marshall super high leg kick. Ferguson Jenkins was the complete opposite. He had the lowest kick you've ever seen in your life.
Right, almost
It
like
was
pitching from a stretch.
Right, right. It was just really bizarre, but that's what I always remember about him.
Here's the funny one. So we're talking about Santo and McCovey and Jenkins. Not that Willie Davis. Willie Davis is a very underrated player. He's still an all-time leader in a lot of Los Angeles Dodger categories. But he was towards the end of his career, and he gets traded for a relief pitcher and a good one. But, a relief pitcher nonetheless. Mike Marshall.
Right.
Mike Marshall goes on to win the Cy Young that year for the Dodgers. He threw like over 200 innings.
Right. 208 and pitched in 106 games.
Right? He basically pitched every day. And if he didn't pitch every day, he was going, 2-3 innings to get the saves. He was just an unbelievable weapon for them back then.
And what's so ironic is, the Dodgers actually had two Mike Marshalls.
That's
they had
right.
Mike Marshall, the reliever
The
in the
outfielder.
70s,
Yep.
and then Mike Marshall, the outfielder in the 80s.
That's right.
So totally different players, but both
Yeah.
did very well at what they did.
I have a good story about the Mike Marshall, the outfielder. I was at a game. I'm a kid. I'm probably 15 years old or something like that. Mike Marshall comes on. He's taking on the Reds. Bottom of the ninth, they're down a run, let's say, and he hits a home run to win the game, a walk-off, as they call it now. And so, everyone stands up and goes crazy. I'm wearing a Walkman listening to Vin call the game. The cord gets draped around my knee. So I stand up, and as I stand up, the cord gets caught, and my Walkman goes flying over the rail down. I never saw it again, so I don't know where the heck it went. But 50,000 people are looking as the ball travels over the wall, and I'm looking over the rail as my Walkman just goes away for forever. So that's my Mike Marr. That's what I remember about him.
I just want to know what a Walkman is. But
You in the Flintstones, they had
That's
those. It was
right.
like Walkman. No.
But you talk about Willie Davis actually had a good season in Montreal as well. He was 295, 12 home runs, whatever. But he ended his career with the Angels. And I don't know why I have to bring that up.
One of the problems of the ABA, I'm assuming back then, was leadership. They couldn't find good leadership to make the league really take off. They had a guy named Mike Storin was the commissioner in 1974. He was the fourth commissioner in 7 seasons for the ABA. He was only 38 years old. I loved this. His wife, Hannah, said, "I didn't marry him for his looks or his money. I married him because he's decisive, a brilliant salesman, and because he's so lovable." But he was very successful running a couple of ABA teams, and so therefore they then gave him the job as commissioner of the ABA.
And he threatened Charlie O'Finley, owned the Memphis Tams at that time. And as you can imagine, Charles Finley his favorite colors are green and gold, so you can guess what the Memphis Tams colors were. That's what he changed the A's to. But anyway, he basically threatened to take the team away from Finley Storen did, and run the team if he didn't start running it like a professional organization and put some money into it.
Wish the baseball would have done that
Right.
sometimes.
He was a Marine.
Yeah.
And so it was his way or the highway. And so, I mean, he was involved in everything, including sending out a league-wide memo that each individual will stand at attention at a 45-degree angle facing the flag during the national anthem. So Mike Storen wasn't going to have any kneeling in the ABA back 50 years ago.
I just like the fact he was a great talker, obviously getting to the position that he was in. But when he got his first job with the Chicago Zephyrs, he couldn't get an interview. So finally he wrote him and said, "Hey, I'm a Captain Storen from the U.S. Marine Corps, and I got some weighty national security measures to discuss." That's how he got in the door.
He was a BSer, in other words.
Exactly.
It's a schmoozers.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. That's the new word.
Yeah.
He blocked the sale of your boy George Gervin going to the Spurs.
But then the Spurs sued him, and
he got it.
stayed.
Court overruled that. And the league and Storen badly wanted Bill Walton to join the ABA. And so they didn't have drafts back then. They just would start negotiating. And they said to Walton, "You can play in San Diego if you want, or we'll start an expansion team in LA. Come then. And I'll tell you what, bring some of your UCLA friends." I mean, they did everything they could to try and get him to come.
But what's interesting, so he only was commissioner for 1 year,
right?
And then he left and he became owner of the Memphis Tams, became the Memphis Sounds, and he co-owned it with Isaac Hayes, the great musician and stuff like that
from South Park.
Yeah,
But
Shaft, man.
But you talk about trying to get Bill Walton. They said they had a good chance to sign Lou Alcindor. But they said they grandstanded too much instead of actually making him an offer. But they said they very possibly could have signed him if they would have just gone at him with a correct and right offer.
I'm trying to remember because I did a show with Kareem about 10 years ago, and he was talking about that the Bucks had drafted him, but the ABA had too. And he seriously considered it, but I believe, and I have to go back and listen to the interview, that he had given his word, I think, to the Bucks or whatever, and that's why he went to the NBA.
Good follow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And just one final thing.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at University of Houston back in the 80s, watching a lot of basketball. And after every game, there was a gal on there that would come up and do Rockets talk. Hannah Storen. I thought, man, she's really good. And all of a sudden, one day, she wasn't there. And all of a sudden, I noticed Hannah Storm. She changed her name from Storen to Storm. So his legacy continues to live on.
Correct.
That's
yes,
right.
the father of Hannah Storm.
Yeah.
ESPN for years and
Yep.
years. So
Can we skip Slaughter on South Island?
Yeah.
that's
the red deer?
The
That's
deers
New
in New
Yeah.
Zealand?
They're
still
still
doing
doing
deers.
it. They're
Unless
still doing
you've
it
got
nowadays.
a
No.
stag
No.
head ready to mount.
I am trying to go to New Zealand this year, and I'm telling you, I will not be shooting deer.
Well, they're still there for $7,000. You can still go on a hunting trip and get those. So
Nice.
they're actually, even though this is 50 years
There's
ago.
nothing I'd rather spend $7,000 on
Yeah.
than
Yes.
just
Bambi,
Yeah.
no thank you.
go shoot a few deer. Oh, look how pretty! Shut up!
dusted
I've
him
never,
off.
I've never understood that. We were at
Yeah.
we were back east this past year at the Hamptons, and these deer would come literally up to the window, and I was never like, my first thought isn't like, God, I'd love to shoot that.
You need it. I need a good purse. That one's going down.
There goes all the hunters in our audience.
Yeah. Sorry.
The NFL Players Association, just like the baseball one when we talked about Marvin Miller, these guys basically played for peanuts back then. The owners made all the money, and the players were lucky to be a part of it until a guy named Ed Garvey became the head of the NFLPA, the National Football League Players Association. He said, when there were negotiations to come up that year, I suspect that we are going to be so far apart on so many issues that the negotiations are going to be like playing the Super Bowl without a ball. Ed Garvey, a very influential and impactful person in his time running the NFLPA.
And I think he was the head of the union when they had the 57-day strike, the NFL strike in 1982.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie. When I first looked at this article, I thought, okay, pass.
Yeah,
And then I thought, no.
I thought the same
Yeah,
thing.
I just thought, here we go. See, the picture of the guy is him just sort of standing there, and I thought, I'll go back to the deer. So, but they had the Rozelle rule. And the Rozelle rule was when a player would sign with another team, you had to compensate that other team with said players or draft picks. So it wasn't free agency. Ed Garvey was able to go in and get rid of that, so actually players could sign with other teams.
Yeah. Management, surprise, surprise, doesn't like him. But one thing, I've really grown to know about NFL owners is that they are some of the most greedy SOBs you could ever imagine. They make a ridiculous amount of money, and yet layoffs in the NFL and NFL Network are persistent. The average NFL team is now worth $5.1 billion. And I just wanted to leave this out. I was going to leave the 0.1 out. I was just going to round off and say they're worth $5 billion. But that 0.1 is $100 million. And that's something I was just ready to just leave off. And they're letting people go who are making, $100K, $85K. It just... It ticks me off. Garvey was banned from all press boxes and on game days locker rooms. Player reps that were consistently waived or traded or cut. The union did go on strike in 74, again in 82. But get this, in 1970, the year before he started, the average NFL salary was $13,000. When he left in 1983, it was $130,000. And in 2023, the average salary of an NFL long snapper is just over $1 million.
Wow.
Well, you look at that, and you're talking about the money part of it. The NFL gross in 73 was $178 million. What do you think it was in 2022? $12 billion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking,
well, we just had, the Super Bowl, last month, and it's the most watched show ever.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, it is not just a football game.
But
it is a
Taylor
show.
Swift effect, too.
But also, you got to remember that CBS obviously didn't make enough money because they laid off 800 people the next day.
Yeah.
So,
that was a tough row for them.
But what I really liked in the article was there's a guard for the Washington Redskins named John Wilbur, and he called Ed Garvey Clark Kent because he said, look at the face, the glasses, the conservative suit, but when he gets on an issue, it's as if he came out of a phone booth in his Superman outfit.
Yeah, I liked how when he was named the NFLPA director, he was ranked number 4 on the top 10 of his local stories. He was the 4th guy. It said, local boy makes good. It was behind the aerobic contest and air show, or the aerobatic contest and air show, and just ahead of storage bin collapse at Co-op. I mean, it didn't even get to be the lead story.
Not even in his
hometown.
small hometown paper.
Yeah.
Well, that was a big storage bin.
That's what it was. It did collapse.
Do you know what was in that? They had they had a couch. Bob McAdoo, he is a name that, once again, there's some of these guys from the 70s that I don't remember all that well. I remember him more from his Laker days when they traded for him, and he wasn't the same player, obviously, then, but you could still see it at times, and he was a big difference maker on 2 of those Laker championship teams.
And he was the big star, and Ernie DiGregorio also on those Buffalo Brave teams that, had some really nice years in the 70s. Right. And for people that don't know who the Buffalo Braves are, they are the LA Clippers. The Buffalo Braves moved to San Diego and became the Clippers, and then in 78, I want to say 79, and then in 84 moved to LA. So the Buffalo Braves, which was an expansion team, is the seed for what the Clippers are today.
Right. And Bob was a quiet guy, didn't go looking for attention, and he played in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. So a lot of his game flew under the radar. But in his second season in the NBA, he's the leading scorer. He was the leading scorer in 74, 75, and 76, winning MVP in 75, runner-up in 74 and 76. And, I mean, just a fantastic player. Keep in mind, this is back in the day when, no three-point line. and he was over 30 points a game for 3 years running. Finally, I thought this was interesting. In the what if category, he's at a junior college. He wanted to go back to North Carolina where he was from and play for the Tar Heels, but they weren't recruiting him, or so he thought. Finally, a UNC assistant coach visited him in person and asked, "Why don't you answer my letters?" And McAdoo said, "Never got them." So these letters had been sent. It's like an email that does. Is in the Netherlands, and if he doesn't meet with this guy, maybe he doesn't go back to Chapel Hill. Maybe he doesn't get drafted as high. I think he was the number 2 overall pick, but a Hall of Famer on the 75th anniversary team, and a great basketball player, Bob McAdoo.
And Mark would know this. He was picked number 2 in the draft, 72. Who was picked number 1?
Oh, wow. In 72.
Oh, it's LaRue Martin.
Oh, I remember the Portland Blazers. The Blazers picked him.
In that same draft was Julius Erving. So 2 of the things, and that's not saying there was a situation why they didn't draft McAdoo in terms of if he was available to be drafted.
Right.
But you look at McAdoo, and I just, like you said, I remember him with the Lakers and the Braves. He had such a beautiful jump shot.
He did.
He had it was just smooth.
Yeah, I can just picture him on the baseline.
Yes.
And he was so tall.
Yes.
So he could get his shot off.
And it was, I think he averaged 10 points in one of his years with the Lakers, but every one of those 10 points were clutch shots. I mean, he was such a great player.
Faces in the crowd, guys, anything?
There was a guy named Don Cutts. He played at Polytechnic, a goalie. He ended up playing in the NHL for the Oilers. Just a few games, but he went from a small college to making it to the NHL when Gretzky played 79-80.
I was looking at Frank Monterosso, who was a 6'4" senior forward at St. Bernard High in Ohio. He scored 70 points against Cincinnati County Day. It was an area single game record. He averaged 35.5 points a game that season. And he actually got inducted later into like the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame for high school players. So, I mean, he never really had an NBA career or even a big time college career, but in high school, he was the man.
But wouldn't you, I mean, even if you could go back to have your number retired at a high school, I mean, anywhere. I think that even though, obviously they don't always go to the top, just to have that is just something you'll always have.
I think we can wrap it up with this, unless you guys have something else. But Linda Ruth mentioned when I asked what her favorite Babe Ruth movie was, and she said, "Oh, there was a made-for-TV movie."
Yes.
Yep.
And I gotta assume that it is the one that we will be talking about next week with the actor who portrayed Babe Ruth, Stephen Lang. Stephen Lang, Bill, give us a little update on who he is.
Stephen Lang played Ike Clanton, if you all remember from Tombstone. He's also a big player in Avatar. So he's
the bad guy.
The bad guy in Avatar. His career is still going up and up, but Mark's got some movies as well.
Well, the first movie I remember was Manhunter, and he's which was made in the 80s, which is the first movie that had Hannibal Lecter in it, before Silence of the Lambs, and he gets set on fire in the movie. So
he normally doesn't play the real nice
guy,
family guy,
right?
Yeah,
but he's had quite a career.
He does,
and it started. This movie, I think, is over 30 years ago, and as Linda said, a made-for-TV movie. But she said it portrayed her grandfather pretty well, because kind of shockingly, there isn't like that definitive Babe Ruth movie out there that has been made yet.
And
the William Bendix one was awful.
Well, reading about Stephen Lang, he played Babe Ruth as the outgoing character. Every other movie seems to play him as he's just the home run guy, but he played him as a fun, and having watched the movie recently, he was fun, outgoing, drinking, women. That's how he portrayed him, and that's the one that Linda said was the one that was the most realistic of her grandfather.
Nice. So Stephen Lang was in both Avatars. They're making, I think, 34 more Avatars.
I think the next one comes out in 2040. So,
So he will be in that, and he will be joining us next week. We thought this would be a perfect opportunity to look at a different perspective on the legend known as Babe Ruth. So that's next week on the Past Our Prime podcast. For this week, want to thank Linda Ruth Tosetti for joining us, and her husband as well. For Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman, This is Scott Johnston. We'll see you next week with Stephen Lang on the Past Our Prime podcast.
See ya.
See ya. Bye-bye.